Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm taking a look at the Eachine TWIG. Now before I go any further, I just want to mention that the frame is a copy of the Speed Racer TWIG from Racer X FPV. I know this because Brian from Racer X sent me a message telling me about the TWIG project, and the name was inspired from something that I said in a video, which was something like, the toothpick class doesn't make any sense because it's just the name of another product. So I said I'd either call them the ultralight micro class or perhaps the twig class, because twigs are light and it could be an acronym for tiny weight in grams. So I always say support the original over copies. I was hoping to get sent the Racer X Twig before Eachine sent this one, but Nick Burns did a great job reviewing the Racer X version, so I'll link to that in the description of this video. Eachine have made a couple of changes to perhaps get away with it not being an exact clone, such as the curved back end and the cutouts underneath are a little different, but it's clear that the design is pretty close to the Racer X version. So this is a 3-inch 2 to 3S ultralight brushless micro, or twig if you want to call it that. But ultralight 3-inch models aren't anything new. In fact, almost 2 years ago I did a build of the FlexRC Komore, which at the time was probably the lightest you could go with a 3-inch, weighing just 85 grams without a lipo, and this Twig model weighs 61 grams, so there's not actually that much difference between the two. This is why I argue around the hype of something being branded as a new thing when it's just a slight evolution of components getting smaller and lighter, but not necessarily better. The Komore can take a 3 to 4S LiPo, a CCD camera, so there's no JALO, and it's also using the 1106 Emax 6000 kV motors. Yeah, they're that old, I couldn't believe it, but yeah, it's amazing how quickly time goes by. And I clocked the Komore going 80 mph, and that was with low pitch tri-blades. So I think this is why I struggle to gel with something that is supposedly a new breed, because there is such a thing as a model being too light. We've been having constant 15 to 20 mph winds for most of the year, and the really light models do get affected by it. But I've been impressed with what I've seen from Racer X FPV, so let's see if some of that has rubbed off on this Eachine copy. The motors are an 1105 5200 kV Eachine branded naked bottom motor running the Gemfan 3025 dual blade props. I hear the HQ props are much better. I'm seeing a lot of flex in these, so on 3S I'm going to predict some vibrations at the top end of the throttle. I do like how it comes with the props already installed and it fits into the provided pouch nicely, so you can just throw it into your FPV backpack and fly. They say it's a 2 to 3S model, but don't tell you what size LiPo or what C rating to use. I've seen people using 450 to 520 milliamp 3S LiPos on the Racer X model, but one thing I found with these ultralights using struts rather than the traditional arm combination, and then with a heavy LiPo at the bottom and the weight of the camera and VTX up top, is that it makes it really difficult to tune out prop wash. And I think it's because the flight controller is having to constantly battle with this weight imbalance. So I'm going light with the battery using a 300 milliamp 3S LiPo. These LiPos are not very good and will sag on heavy punch outs, but the voltage usually recovers quickly, so it's more of an experiment to see if I can combat prop wash issues. With this LiPo, its all-up weight is only 86 grams. The main guts of the model is the Crazy Bee V3, so it's got 10 amp rated BL Heli S 4-in-1 ESCs, along with an F4 flight controller that has Betaflight on-screen display and a built-in SPI receiver. Interestingly, they have added a 1mm pitch 3-pin JST connector so that you can add your own S-Bus receiver. I think this is Eachine realizing that the built-in receiver is only good for about 80 meters, so essentially this is a plug and fly with the added bonus of having a built-in receiver if you don't want to spend the extra on an external receiver. I'm going to be using the built-in receiver today in D8 mode, as there still seems to be issues regarding dropouts using the D16 protocol. I find that you get more range if you can somehow mount the receiver's antenna upright rather than it facing down, as when it's in the down position it's being blocked by your LiPo, and luckily this canopy allows it to sit in the side, which will still see it getting blocked by the camera, but the camera is much less dense than a LiPo. It's come flash with Betaflight version 4.04, and the setup was a little bit hit and miss for me. For example, motor stop was turned on and air mode was turned off, which isn't great for acro. They've come up with their own PIDs. They also didn't have the VTX channel readout selected for the on-screen display. Just like the Beta FPV HX100, the USB connector protrudes through to the underneath of the frame. So if you don't use the two provided foam pads, your LiPo will be resting on the USB port, which is bad because it can damage your LiPo, and it can also rip off the USB port in a crash. I wouldn't use the foam pads either though, as they somehow make the LiPo slip even easier. You're going to want to get a silicone mat to clear the USB connector and to stop your LiPo from throwing in a crash. The VTX is the non-DVR version of Happy Model's Diamond VTX. It uses smart audio and can switch from 25 milliwatt, 100 milliwatt and 200 milliwatt. Those three settings coincide with the first three power levels of TBS smart audio in the on-screen display settings. However, one thing they have done is put a setting in the CLI so that the VTX runs at 25 milliwatt when it's not armed. So the power output on your on-screen display will show 1, and then when you arm the model it will change to whatever power output you have set it to. I think it comes set to Bosscam band A and then channel 2 with a power output of 200 milliwatts out of the box. The antenna is a sleeve dipole and is away from the props thanks to this simple hole in the top of the canopy. When I first saw pictures of the canopy I was optimistic because it's solid and not the usual TPU jello maker. However, the material is quite thin and it also feels like it could crack easily. So with these flexible props and the Runcam Nano 2 being a CMOS camera, I'm not that confident that flights are going to be jello free. The Runcam Nano 2 is the 4x3 version. Left in the package is a manual, a spare set of props as well as a mini screwdriver and an Allen key, some spare screws, nuts and soft mounts. Okay, let's go for a line of sight with this guy. This is with the Happy Model 300 milliamp 3S. Let's see what the punch is like. Oh yeah, plenty of power. Pretty calm day here as well today, so fingers crossed I can get an FPV flight in. Seems to be behaving line of sight. Hearing a slight zing at the top, which could be vibrations. We'll have to see if that manifests as the old jello in the FPV feed. The sun's sort of coming in and out though, so I can't guarantee that I'll be able to show that fully. We have not seen much sun this year. little bit of an oscillation there, so yeah. I think maybe just adjust the PIDs slightly. I mean, they never give you the information, oh, it's this battery and this battery, you know. You really have to tune a quad for a particular battery, and when they just say, oh yeah, it does 3 and 2S, and then doesn't tell you a size or what C rating was used for the tune, then, you know, you're pretty much stuck. But that's what you get with cheap binding flies. But so far, on the line of sight, behaving pretty nicely. Heard just a little bit of an oscillation. It's not too loud. It is still small, so if you fly in line of sight, don't let it get away from you, but let's bring it in for a landing. So when I flew the model FPV, those oscillations manifested themselves a lot more when it came to the roll axis. So I changed the PIDs, and I'll overlay them if you want to use this model with a 300 milliamp 3S Happy model LiPo. And it's flying great. No prop wash oscillations whatsoever. You can see I'm doing tight turns and trying my best to actually induce prop wash oscillations, and it's not doing it. So that's either down to the design of this frame from Racer X FPV, which Eachine has copied, or me going with a lighter battery. Perhaps it is a combination of the two. Now, I was getting a little bit of jello on the throttle. You can see there just in the corner, the Runcam Nano 2 making the sun look like Nibiru. But yeah, when I went up on the throttle, the jello wasn't as bad as I thought, but it was still there. Now just watch this here. So full throttle, we've got a huge voltage sag as I predicted, but I don't know if this is going to show through on YouTube, but there's actually quite a bit of video noise filtering through from the electrical system. And this is something that I found with these V3 Crazy Bee boards, is that they've now removed the capacitor, because the capacitor was originally there because the onboard regulator couldn't take the voltage spikes. But now that the ESCs are 10 amp capable, and that's per ESC, it's actually allowing some noise filtering through to the video feed. So perhaps they need to put a low ESR capacitor on those battery terminals, but this time to combat noise reaching through to the video. But yeah, you can see that I'm getting a lot of voltage sag, and there we go, straight into the sun. I think it read 8 volts there. The flight time wasn't too bad on this LiPo. I think it was just around about 3 minutes, and at this point I'm just enjoying flying the model. So it's a tricky one really, because once you get it all set up, it's a really nice model, and the price is really cheap for what you get. They also do a HD one as well, so I think that's got the Cadex baby turtle in there. So I have to see if I receive that one. But yeah, it's kind of a moral dilemma, because the frame has been copied, but if you get it set up nicely, then it's actually a nice model to fly. I would definitely put a external receiver on there, because the range isn't that great. But there is my review of the Eachine TWIG. I'll put a link in the description if you wish to get one, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.